All right. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I know that today we would probably have a lot fewer than we normally have because we've got a big group that are out at Burnt Cabin on a retreat. So not only some of our youth group members, but also some of our adults who are out there doing that. So I thought today we'd probably be a little shorter number than we've usually had. But we know they'll catch up online, right? We'll use their phones that we're talking about to watch this back. All right, so this is number 3 in this short series that we're doing. Next week will be the last one that the youth group will be in here for, and then we'll continue on a slightly different. It'll be the same kind of stuff, but a slightly different focus. Next week is going to be on so just some suggestions for maybe what to do differently. And so I wanted to start just with a quick reminder. It's really tough. Like you do something like this, and you want to continue to remind yourself that this is rooted in principle, scriptural principle. But there's a lot of studies and other facts and other things to consider to help in some way convince ourselves that this is a scriptural problem, that what we're talking about does have spiritual ramifications. So I want to just start with these two passages as brief reminders. And let me just say off the bat that I realize that the passages that I have as reference here, the one in chapter 10 is specifically about idolatry, which is one of the things we have been trying to do throughout the class, is show that there are many other forms of idolatry than just a golden calf, but anything that exists in our life that demands the majority of our time and our attention, or that has a transformative impact on the way we live our lives, can become an idol in our lives. And so that that sin isn't limited to specific lists that we find in Scripture. You know, oftentimes we have these vice lists, and we use those as determinative of what sin is, but those are symptoms of sin, capital S, which is in Romans, the worship of self, or the created rather than the creator. And so all symptoms of sin come from a position of the heart that says, I care more about worshiping what I want, paying attention, thinking, loving, all that of what I want and myself over the things that God wants. And so the first passage here, lawful but helpful. So he's specifically in that section talking about sexual immorality and the questions that revolve in the church around those things. But the principle behind the argument that he's making, I believe, can be applied much more broadly than that. I'm not typically someone who likes to just remove things from the text without their context. So just wanted to acknowledge that I do realize that he's speaking specifically about sexual immorality, but the principle that he applies, I think, is applicable to many other types of things, in particular what we're talking about. So his argument there is, it's just because we can, should we, is the main question. It may not be unlawful, but is it actually helpful, what the arguments you're making and what it is you're doing? The passage here later on in chapter 10, he is talking about idolatry, and the focus verse of that I just wanted to mention is, he says, therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. And the argument there is against hubris. If you know what hubris means, it's essentially the idea of, I've got it under control, I don't need any help, I'm fine. What he's saying is take heed these warnings about things that could become idolatry in your life. Actually pay attention to it, lest it become an issue and it causes your fall. We can think, I've got it under control, this is not becoming that in my life, I don't really have to worry about it, I'm fine. And we can rationale and make all these arguments and excuses while not realizing that it's taking a much bigger hold of ourselves than we want it to. And that's kind of the the point of this class, is to try to at least get us thinking that there is maybe more inherent danger in our use of our phones than we might think there is. You know what? There's a movie, Unusual Suspects, I think, that has this quote in it that says the greatest trick that the devil ever played was what? Convincing the world that he didn't exist. I find that helpful in this conversation, that it can become the kind of problem in our life without us knowing it. And so that leads to this final passage here, Hebrews 12. He says that we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Let us lay aside every weight or sin. In other words, let us lay aside anything that can wrap us up, that can entangle us, that can cling to us. Let us lay aside anything that could be a hindrance to us fully worshiping and dedicating ourselves to God. And let us run with endurance instead the race that is set out for us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. All right. So with that kind of in mind, or reminding ourselves of sort of the point of why we're doing this, why we're talking about this, and I hope that you're also hearing, it's not that I'm saying I think anyone has a problem, I'm just saying we all need to be thinking about this as a serious deal. Last week I kind of ended with sometimes you kind of feel like a crazy person saying this is such a big deal, and everybody's kind of looking at you like whatever, but seriously, it can be a big deal. It can be a really big deal. And so I wanted to start with before I get to social media, which is kind of be the main focus on this morning. I wanted to wrap up just a few more further ramifications of just in general use of our phones. And the first, and these are more anecdotal. The ones that I talked about last week, if you weren't here, go back and take a look at that. These are more anecdotal, my experiences of just working with teenagers and college students and adults all through over the years, and the changes that I have seen when people really started having phones as being a major part of their life. I mean, because I still, unfortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, grew up in the age of the curly Q phone that was attached to the wall. And I didn't have a cell phone until I was married, which seems wild now when you think about that. It's 20 years ago. But I didn't have a phone when we first got married. And the progression from when I first got like a little brick Nokia that's basically like the cockroach of phones, they just cannot be destroyed, to where we are now. And never having been truly sold on all the things that they do, kind of witnessing some changes that I've seen. And one of the first ones is this idea of expectations and disappointment. How that this technology has altered our expectations and created disappointments. For instance, here's just one example of created expectations that shouldn't be there and the disappointment that arises. When you see this one, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Or what's the first thing you notice? All right, who is it from? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say who it's from. But presumably you would know. But I can tell you what gives me the most anxiety. Red. What does this new feature of our phones, what kind of anxiety or problems does that create?
They read it, so why haven't they responded?
Yeah, they read it, so why haven't they responded? That seems so simple. What does that spiral into? Or can it spiral into, depending on a temperament? I'll just say, be careful how you answer. But as a guy, answer that way. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. You think they're busy. All right. Anybody else want to share another perspective on that?
I could see as a guy, if you send someone a message, you might have something more structured, like, hey, are we going to do this? And you see it's red. It's like, hey man, it's in a few hours. You need to answer me. Mm-hmm. Like, come on, we got to get this going. But I could see a guy going down that road and being like, start to get more and more frustrated. Yeah. It's like, I know you see this, and I'm trying to schedule something. Okay.
It's the same kind of question of, hey, can we talk? what about?
Yeah.
It's dinner. Is it,
Yeah.
is the house on fire? What's going on? And those kind of statements infuriate me.
Yeah.
And I will not respond to them because I'm doing other things.
Right. I've got a life. I've got a life. So I will say from experience, I have also seen the levels of depression that something like this leads to, particularly in some of the college girls that I've worked with before. They may have been, they call it being left on red, right? Is that what y'all were just talking about? Being left on red, like you respond to, you text someone, they see it, and they don't respond to you for several days. You begin to have all these ideas in your head about why they're not responding. This happened to me once. I had broke my phone or something, and I had seen someone's message, and then I don't know what happened to my phone. But anyway, for whatever reason, it was out of control. The next thing I know, several days have gone by, and I've got a student who's thinking I just hate them, and that I want to kick them out of the group, and maybe they're never coming to church again. And I was like, whoa, hold up. I broke my phone, right? So it creates an unfair expectation that because you saw it and you don't respond, you're making an active, intentional, and hateful choice not to respond. It creates an unfair expectation on the part of the person who's receiving this, right? Because the thing I think it creates is because I have access to your phone, I deserve access to you 24/7. And is that true? Do we want that to be true? It blurs lines in work and your private life. There's all kinds of issues that happen. Here's the other thing that I think we dread a lot. Has anybody ever experienced this? Goes away, comes back, goes away, comes back, goes away, and no message ever comes, right? I hate it. I hate it so much. The dreaded 3 dots. All right, so this is I call it the tyranny of the urgent, right? The tyranny of the urgent. And this happens in our family a lot. I'll ask Harper a question or she'll text me a question. If there's not an immediate response, it's like, question mark, exclamation point, hello, question mark. And it's like, I'm in the middle of a meeting or she's at school in a class or something like that, right? And so I fall prey to it as well, and it can create unfair tension and issues. Also, it's an idea of what's actually important. Oftentimes, I had this happen to me in a class. I was teaching a class at ACU, and I was in the middle of this lecture talking about something that was going to be on the test, and I had a student raise their hand. Of course, thinking they have a question about something I've said, I call on them. And they said, and I had a no phone policy in my classroom. You weren't supposed to have your phones, a zero tolerance, no phone policy. She raises her hand, and I call on her, and she goes, my roommate just texted me that she's locked out of our dorm. Can I leave and go let her in? And I said, is this an emergency? Well, she's really mad because she wants to take a nap. I was like, you can leave, but I will dock you a letter grade. It was so infuriating. I'm going to tell a story on Jerry Keeley too. And he shared this with me. He was telling me, we were talking about this class, and he said, I was doing a presentation at Georgia Pacific. I'm there in front of a big group of people. I'm giving the presentation. And he said, my phone buzzed on my hip. The next thing I know, I look up, and everyone's just silently staring at me because I had pulled it out to look at it and then just got lost in the middle of a presentation while everybody was watching me. I just stop and I just start scrolling and looking and checking and things, and then I look up and I'm like, it was like Twilight Zone. It's like it just totally so captured whatever was more urgent than what I'm in the middle of doing. It's surpassed the way we have been connected, and it has gotten to where it demands over whatever we're doing in the moment. And these can cause frustrations, anxiety, unmet expectations that cause relational problems with people around us. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about now social media. This is the big one. And when does anybody remember when the idea or the concept of social media first began? What was the first ever thing? Anybody remember? That was truly social media. It was the big one. Only your grandparents use it nowadays. What? Well, MySpace was it was a page that people could come and look at, but really Facebook probably got it started, right? MySpace was first, but it was kind of a page they could come and look at stuff. I don't remember it being very interactive.
I can't remember.
Instagram was way later. So Facebook started, and it started only on college campuses, and now the only people on it, are old people and your grandma and someone trying to sell something on Facebook. Yeah, back in the 1900s. All right, so here are some of the issues that people, and I'll try to share where I've come across them. Like Harvard University there's so many people doing studies these days that it's overwhelming when you start trying to go look. I would recommend The Anxious Generation. If you haven't read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, that's incredibly powerful. There's a lot more if you're interested, but they kind of do a good job of like butterflying net all of the different studies into one spot. But here's some of the main issues that people are seeing. First is that it is incredibly egocentric. What that means is that social media is designed to focus on the individual rather than the community. And when you focus on the individual at the expense of the community, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I mean, it's a bad thing, right? When I'm only concerned about what I think or what I'm doing at the expense of everybody else. Now, again, let me just put a pause for a second and say what I said last week. I'm not saying that there are no good uses of these things. I'm only, because there's no need to convince anybody in here of the potential benefits. But what I do want to try to say is put best by a friend of mine who's a youth minister. He said, because he used to be a huge social media guy, he said, I'm convinced now that the positives do not outweigh the negatives any longer. Used to be that the positives of what it could offer outweigh the negatives, but now the negatives are just slewing in a much higher way. So it's the individual that is the focus. Self-disclosure, the idea of sharing your life or telling other people about yourself and your life, which is what social media does. It lights up the same parts of your brain that light up when you partake in a addictive substance. So alcohol, drugs, those sorts of things are engaging the same parts of your brain. They light up as self-disclosure, as putting your life out there for everybody to see, however content created it might be. So it's affecting the same parts of our brain that cause us to get addicted to stuff. So the point of that is to say that this is behavior designed to be addictive. It's lighting up the same parts of our brain. In The Social Dilemma, which is a great show there on Netflix, they explain that the platforms, and we saw a little bit of this last week, are designed to hook you in and keep you scrolling because the former president of Pinterest said the business model of all of these platforms is to keep you engaged on your screen. When you get a notification, a like, a mention, any of those things, the brain receives that rush of dopamine and then rewires itself to want to get more of that same thing. That's that addictive cycle. When you get a hit of something that causes you pleasure or lights up those parts of your brain, you naturally want to repeat that process. And rather than that being in healthy expressions, it's in things that get you addicted to more self-disclosure, to more addiction to these programs. The reward centers of your brain are most active when you're talking about yourself. In the non-virtual world, this is what this bottom is. Like here, while we're talking, 30 to 40% of the conversation, or 30 to 40% of the time, people are talking about themselves. It's not very often because when you're engaging in conversation, it's give and take. You want to give the other person a chance to talk about themselves because that's how relationships work. On social media, it's 80% of the time. Is all you're doing is talking about yourself. All right, what about the mental and emotional aspect? So the California State University did a huge sweeping study. And here's what they found. That the overuse or habitual use, especially from a young age, stunts a person's ability to interact in a social way. Heavy users have worsened social anxiety in groups because they're used to their communication and their interactions happening only online. They have higher rates of depression, especially in females. And there is a higher suicide rate. They have a more negative body image and lowered levels of empathy and compassion. Those are major problems. There was a social media site called Yik Yak when we were doing college ministry. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it was anonymous and within a certain radius, and you could say whatever you wanted because it was anonymous. And the kind of horrible, horrible stuff that would show up on there. Because if I cannot experience the consequence of what I do or say in a real world, real-time way, I am set free to do or say whatever I want. That is not good for humanity. It is not good, especially for Christians, to have the empathy and compassion removed. Even to be able to put whatever I want out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, those kinds of things. I'm not experiencing a face-to-face consequence for my action. If I have something bad I want to say about Gary, and I could say whatever I want on Facebook, but I would never say it to his face because I'm afraid of Gary. No, I'm not. But you see what I'm saying? Like, we would find our way to kindness easier than we do when we're on there because I can just throw it out. I don't have to think about the tone. I don't have to think about what I'm doing to another person.
What it does mentally to the other person because they know somebody in their circle said that.
That's right. There are three other problems that come with it. Curated content is the first, meaning when I am engaging online, I am seeing what a person has decided to show me. I'm not seeing real life, right? So if I can start feeling bad about myself, I can start comparing myself to others because I am seeing their perfect life and wondering why my life isn't so perfect. And so that forces me to either to act out or do something differently or to engage in the same behavior. When they're able to track suicidal thoughts and even acting on those to certain trends in technology and social media, and you know what the biggest spike was? The biggest spike was when the like button was invented and when the backwards-facing camera was invented, or the front-facing camera so you could take selfies. Those are the two biggest trends that changed and caused these numbers to start skyrocketing. When we can start judging other people and when we can start taking pictures of ourselves that are curated to show the best possible angle and version of myself that I want. Not to mention now that they have the filters that smooth out your humanity and make you look like an AI figure. All of these things are causing issues. How many of you know what FOMO means? Fear of missing out. How many of you know what the other one means? Fear of being left out. Fear of being left out. There's the other issue. If you're anyone, this is not just teenagers, this is all the way to adults. When you see something happening in a group of your friends that are out doing something, why wasn't I invited? Why wasn't I there? It's because they specifically chose to not include me. The kinds of mental spirals that happen when you get into that way of thinking. People who use social media 58 times a week are 3 times more likely to feel isolated or depressed compared to those who use it less. All right, Nottingham Trent did a huge study, and they came up with probably what is one of the definitive diagnostic criteria or tests for social media addiction disorder. It has now become codified that this is a legit disorder. And here are some of the markers to begin thinking about. Possible addiction, mood modification. When you engage in social media to feel better. So when you're feeling stressed or worried or anxious or have anxiety, and you engage in social media use in order to change your emotional state. Salience. This refers to behavioral, cognitive, and emotional preoccupation with usage. You're thinking about when you can carve time out of your day to get on there. Your thoughts are bent towards it. You're emotionally unstable depending on how much you can engage in sharing your life or in getting likes from other people. Tolerance. How much are you using it, and how much do you need to use to make yourself feel better? From an hour a day to much more. Withdrawal symptoms. Those who have it taken away or find themselves in restricted situations can experience physical, emotional symptoms when they can't engage in it. You start feeling anxious and worried, and same kinds of things from when you can't use a drug. Or relapse. An addict will decide, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to get off of there. I'm going to delete all my apps. 2 weeks goes by, and then, oh, well, I just need to check it for this one thing, and then, goes and spirals again. So, how do they determine if there is an addiction? Those are some of the markers. Here are some questions that they have. And they say if you answer 3 yeses, then you are borderline addicted. Do you spend time thinking about it or planning how to use it? Do you feel the urge to use it more and more? Do you use it to forget or distract yourself from personal issues? Do you use it to reduce your stress? Do you become restless or troubled if you're unable to? Does it have a negative impact on your life and on your relationships? So what they say is if you answer yes to 3 or more of these, you are likely on the road to addiction. All right, so you know how on your any of these phases, there's like the infinite scroll where it just never ends? You know what I'm talking about? So the guy who invented that, he said this: there's a major problem with the way we design our social media. And he says this: if you're not paying for a product, then you are the product. He notes that there was a major shift that took place in social media once it became more than what Facebook was initially. Initially it was just for college students to connect, but as it grew, they shifted away from a model that was selling products to a user to selling users as products. That's the idea behind these services. Justin Rosentine, he worked for Facebook. He was the one who created the like button. He said, these are services that are on the internet. We think of them as free. They're not free. They're paid for by advertisers. And so he says that the user is the product. Our attention is the item that's being sold to advertisers. So have you ever had the thought or the feeling that, you talked about something you liked, and the next thing you know, when you pull up your email or social media, that's all you saw on there? You sound crazy? That's what's happening. It's actually what's happening. They design them that way because the way they get money is by providing you or showing you things that will get your attention and keep you engaged in whatever service you're using. The advertisers are paying for you, paying for your attention. They call it surveillance capitalism. It's actually a term they use in advertising, surveillance capitalism. They figure out what you like, what you pay attention to, what you're going to do, and then they sell that. They have 3 goals: increasing engagement, growing the number of users, and tailoring advertisements to you specifically. So, why do they do that? Because we're the product. We're the product. We're not using these services in their minds. They're using us. I don't like that very much. I don't know about you guys. When we get on there and we just are on there way more than we think, it's like playing the slot machine. Have you ever had the experience of scrolling for 3 or 4 minutes before seeing something you actually liked? That's also on purpose. That's the variable rate thing we talked about last week. The way to addict somebody to something is to not give them a hit of what they want to see every time, but only every so often so to keep them engaged in doing it. And they do that rather intentionally. All right, so there's a positive side to this, of course, but there's also a dark side that affects us. And what they're finding is that children and younger users are more at risk than anybody else. And the reason for this is pretty simple. There's a generation who is born into the social media age, and for them, you grow up believing spending several hours of time on this is realistic and it's normal. For some of the older ones of us, we're digital immigrants. We have come to this later in life. And knew what life was like before it. And so we can kind of see maybe, is this really such a great idea that we're spending so much time on it? But for people who grow up doing this, it's all they know and it's all their friends know. And if you don't, you're not really that normal. We have never let Harper have a social media page. And Harper, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but how do you feel about that?
Don't really care
Why?
because I just don't. I'm more at it, so there's no reason to.
It's hard to put the cat back in the bag once the cat is out of the bag. But if you don't know what the cat is, you've never had a chance to get like hooked on it. And she's told me this before, that she sees the problems it's created in some of her friend circle. And he's like, why would I want any part of that? It's really hard to put the cat back in the bag, but you can. When that's all the life that you know, and you don't have the point of reference for what life outside these digital villages look like, when your online community doesn't seem to approve of choices you make, that's really harmful. And I know for a digital immigrant, sometimes we don't quite understand the impact that that has, but it's because we didn't grow up living in that world. The kind of impact that it has is huge. The guy I mentioned, Jonathan Haidt, he's a social psychologist. He's done a lot of work on this. He notes that there is a gigantic increase in the cases of depression and anxiety amongst teenagers at the advent of social media, especially accessible on your phone. Especially girls aged 10 to 14, there was a 151% increase in suicide thoughts and depression and anxiety as compared to the previous generations. And the only major difference is this new elevated use. So it's a much, much, much bigger deal than we can give it credit for. So the question then is, how do we lay it aside? Knowing that it can or has become such a huge part of our lives, what are some things that we can do to try to mitigate that, to try to use them as the tools that we would like them to be or that we claim them to be, rather than sort of the all-encompassing thing that has the power to cause us joy or happiness, depression, anxiety, all of those things. Because I'll just claim for myself that this and everything that it represents should not have the power to cause me to be depressed. It shouldn't have the power to give me joy. It should be a tool that helps me be efficient in my life and reach those that I love, but it shouldn't be the thing that so consumes me that I can't live without it. So next week, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So I'm curious just to open it up for a minute. We haven't really had time for many comments or questions or thoughts, just because there's been like so much that I've been trying to get through. I'm just curious what your experience has been. And if just kind of open it up. Any thoughts? We've just got like a few minutes here.
Chuck, for me, the biggest thing that I've had to learn to do, and I'm going to use the addiction word because it is designed to be addictive. And I go back to the days of the Weather Channel or 24-hour news. Those things have similar traits to the addictive nature of social media. What I had to learn to do was carry out what Matthew writes in Matthew chapter 12, verses 43 through 45. It's when you clean your house is a problem. Because we know that this is addictive. We know the consequences that come with it. And I've got to get this out of my life. I just spent, for example, let's say, quote unquote, 3 hours on Facebook, and I didn't get any work done, or whatever it may be. We know that that's wrong. So I'm going to not get on Facebook, remove the app from my phone, whatever it is. Okay, great. It's the same thing maybe for an alcoholic. I'm going to stop drinking, therefore I'm not going to walk down the beer aisle with Reasers. Whatever it is. But the key is yes, clean your house, but what are you going to fill it with? And that's the mistake that I made. Is I knew it was wrong to be in whatever environment it would be, but I never put good things back in my house.
Yeah.
So it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits, more evil than itself, and they entered and dwelt there. And the last state of that person was worse than the first.
Yeah.
That's what we've got to fix, is replace, when we clean our house, fill it with good things.
You know, it's interesting. Like there's a metaphor at the beginning of Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation, and he really focuses a lot more on the impact in schools and in young kids and teenagers than he does with anything. But at the very beginning, he starts with this interesting metaphor, and he said, as a parent, what would you do if someone came to you and said, we're looking to colonize Mars, we're looking for people that we want to send up there, we think your kid has what it takes to succeed up there. And then you think, okay, great. Well, what are the ramifications of that? How is it going to change your body? How's it going to change your mind? How's it going to impact all of these? Well, we don't really know, but we're just going to see what happens. Would anyone sign up for that? Would anyone sign up for it themselves to say, I have no idea the lasting damage this is going to cause to me, but let's sign up to do it anyway? The creator of Instagram said, we knew it would be problematic. We didn't know why, and we didn't really care because we knew it would make us money. Carrie?
I will say, hi, I'm Carrie. I'm walking from my house, sorry. I am a person that is prone to depression, and, you know, I've seen over time teaching in a university setting, our problems, I'm sure Justin's talked about, went from, you know, interpersonal, like roommate issues, to literally trying to keep kids from harming themselves or worse in a span of 10 years. It was here, and then the pendulum was way over here. And so I've had to learn over the years, because I can't just delete all of my accounts because I have to use them for work. And I hear that problem a lot with people. You know, I work in the theater, and so we communicate on Facebook. We make a Facebook group for that cast so that we can make our announcements or whatever. And it's very problematic when somebody's like, well, I don't use that. I don't check my messages. I don't, you know, it's a problem. So what I've had to learn over the years is, and it's maturity, to treat it like a spiritual discipline, that yes, I have to do this for this amount of time to get my work done. And it's also been a way for me to communicate with family. And the second I start realizing this is just giving me advertisement after advertisement, or I don't know these people, it's just showing me people I should be comparing myself to, I set it down. I get up, I take a walk so that I can see the beauty of the nature around me, because that's something that roots me back to myself and back to God. I do something productive. I notice the blessings around me, because I'm very, very prone to comparing myself to other people, or to, you know, you see, you know, Scamanda and all of the shows, like why can't my dad cure himself of cancer by just changing his diet or something like that, you know? It leads you down that rabbit hole very quickly. And so I have had to make a conscious choice that this is the way it's going to be. And it's no different when I am at work, and they're teaching us right now, we have to start using AI as a tool. I'm like, I kind of don't feel like I want to do this, but they're like, no, this is what we're doing. But here are your parameters.
That way we're bringing down our wolves back. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody seems to have watched Jurassic Park in the last 30 years. Whatever. But I think as long as we're teaching, here's the appropriate use of it, that's a different conversation than, sure, open your social media account and have fun. I'll see you next week or whatever. Good luck.
And that's what we'll talk about next week. How do we start putting the cat back in the bag, and is it possible? So hopefully you guys will be here for that.